Welcome to the CEO's Cyber Briefing podcast. Real, raw conversations about what puts your business at risk and how to stay ahead of the game. Hosted by me, David Fleckner, founder and CEO of Centra. This podcast isn't about fear or fluff. It's just what leaders like you need to know before it's too late. This week, I'm joined by Jake Bernardes. Jake's going to be talking us through how to build security without slowing down growth and what do most startups get wrong about security. Jake is a 4-time CISO and advisor to some of the world's fastest growing companies. Join Jake where he'll share where security usually breaks down, how to fix it fast, and why founders can't afford to wait. Enjoy the show. Jake, welcome to the CEO's Cyber Briefing podcast. Great to have you on as a guest. Jake, I posted something a couple of weeks back on LinkedIn which got quite a bit of engagement and sparked quite a bit of conversation. That post was focused around a stat that I found online which said that 44%, there's been a 44% increase in cyber attacks since January of the previous year. In your expert opinion, what do you put that surge down to? What's happening in the world right now that's seeing such a big increase?
Oh gosh, well, there's a lot to unpick. So firstly, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I think I'm always skeptical of any statistic because statistics are used for the purpose of marketing, right? That's my general thesis on things. And It's hard, particularly in cyber attacks, because what is it? Like, is that people? Is that businesses? What's the business type? What's the business size? What's the type of attack? Like, what was the effect of the attack? Was it just someone tried to enter, or did they get any data? Are these all declared attacks, or are these things being notified by regulators with the undeclared or settled out of court? Like, what is the completeness and accuracy, to sound like an auditor? Like, what's the context of it? So I think that's the first one. But there has unquestionably been a rise in attacks. And I think quite simply that goes down to the rise in the use of OpenAI, particularly ChatGPT. If you look now, I think there are more attacks coming through traditional. I'm backgrounded as a social engineer. That's what I did as a pen tester. And I think that that's now become a lot easier. You can build and craft and create spear, whale, and general phishing attacks very quickly. Phishing and vishing as well. So I think that's seen a dramatic increase. You can also create and craft real exploits very quickly and easily now, using things like Replit, which you can manipulate into writing viruses or worms, or Trojans, or whether that's ransomware or malware type attacks. So I think building attacks is now a lot easier, but I'm not sure I necessarily believe or buy into the stat that there's more efficacy in those attacks. I think a lot of them are quite mundane, immature in their kind of intelligence or technological stance, and therefore not actually doing as much as people think they are. So I think there might be an increase in volume of attacks, but I'm not sure I believe there's an increase in efficacy of attacks.
Okay, and vishing and phishing, for those people who don't know, can you tell us a little bit more about what the...
Yeah, so back in the day, it was never hard, but it was harder. So vishing and phishing are video phishing or audio or phone phishing. So a phish attack in its most simplest form is that email that you got usually from some mine in Africa that said, if you give me $1,000 off, be part of a gold mine, I'll give you $1 million in a year, right? The most common and traditional of all those attacks. What you then see is the mimicking of audio attacks. So I can clone your voice with, worst case, pessimistically, 30 seconds of audio out of various different Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all that kind of audio content, build a profile where I can then give it a script and sound like you and call someone through the phone, or send them a WhatsApp message is even easier, and therefore be able to effectively mimic somebody and try and create a situation in which someone will do something. Vishing is the video form. So we've all seen and read recently about the crafting of videos that were politicians effectively and enabling them to attack in a different way. And again, it's not hard with the way that we share our lives on Instagram these days to take someone's image and likeness and create a video that asks them. So historically, we've seen lots now where CEOs are being compromised and asking for transaction requests. Historically, it was no finance director ever was stupid enough to, on the basis of an email, to go and process a $2,000 payment without any kind of permissions or logic. However, if someone Zoom calls you, appearing to be your CEO, you suddenly seem to do a lot less checks and gates to kind of verify that identity. So you've seen a huge rise in those types of attacks because they're simply now a lot easier using AI to build the attack.
Okay, and your background, your kind of body of work is impressive. You work for a number of fast-growing startups. What is then the biggest mistake that you're seeing around security? right now?
The security, gosh, well, let me give two to answer that question. One which will offend a lot of my peers and one which is more realistic and honest. So security leadership is being given to people who don't have the competency, knowledge, or understanding to lead. We've seen the rise of the CISO. Many of them, rightly or wrongly, and people will disagree with me, come from audit and consulting backgrounds, and those people simply don't have the technical competencies, knowledge, or understanding to build and lead security practices, particularly in fast-growing technology-led SaaS businesses. So I think that's problem number one, is the people leading them don't know what they're doing. Problem number two is that they then pick a strategy that's guided by compliance standards and not by risks. So they'll then say, right, I'm going to do NIST, or I'm going to do SOC 2, I'm going to do ISO, whatever you are in the world, right? And they'll build their controls and therefore build their security practice based on meeting the controls of those standards. The reality is they're not always applicable. Like, you have to be led by risks, and the risks have to be dynamic and based in data. You need to know what the risks in your business are. Start with that. What's the risk assessment specific to this business type, in this geography or industry, with this technology, in this time period? Because your risks change. When you're a 100-person startup, your risk is very different to when you're a 1,000-person mid-market business. So your risks have to be specific, realistic, and contextualized. They have to be dynamic. So your risks need data. If you're going to tell me my risk is, you know what, I'm pushing code out super fast to try and meet deadlines to build my product really quick, my risk is that we miss vulnerabilities. Fine. Show me the data that supports that risk. Like, it's not hard. Get Git up, get Jira up. Show me where the tags are that show that you're pushing code quicker than the scan can be done in reality. And then show me how you're mitigating that risk. So once you've got a set of risks, you should then spend your time, you should then hire your team, and you should buy tooling, not based on sexy branding and who look cool or black hat, but based on what your risks actually are. Like, that's the problem that most people are doing, is they're building security based on Instagram trends or LinkedIn trends in this context, and based on what they previously knew as an auditor, and not based on the risks that are contextual, specific, and real time to the business, using data to drive their decision-making processes.
So if I'm a tech CEO right now, my business is scaling fast, what's typically the thing that falls apart first when I'm scaling when it comes to security? What am I missing in the kind of beginning months that you see that falls apart first?
Two things. One, go back to my last comment, is risk. If you create a set of risks that was specific to your business type when you're a 100-person, you've now scaled, your risks aren't the same. If your risk register isn't changing and your CISO isn't able to explain why this risk went away and this one appeared, but they weren't the same, they weren't relevant, and can't show you the data that supports why those risks are there and the data that shows how he's reducing them or not reducing them, like, that is a fundamental issue. The second is scale and automation. Any CISO can build manually against a control set. It takes a skill set in hypergrowth and startups to be able to build something that scales and automates. From day one, knowing how to build something which can scale, not just solve the problem now, but will solve the problem in a year and in 5 years' time. And not just having to throw people at it, but have a solution where there's automation based on monitoring and alerting and detection and knowing what's happening. I think particularly in startups and scale-ups, you need a CISO who understands technology. Just being a great leader or a great exec is not enough in that space. Like, they've got to have technical competencies. They've got to be able to speak to engineering. They've got to be able to understand what Splunk really means when you look at the data set. They have to know their way around AWS admin console or GCP, whatever it might be. They have to understand what they're looking at. They need to not be coders, but they need to understand what it says.
Yeah. So you've mentioned CISO there, so Chief Information Security Officer. In your opinion, when should a company be looking to bring on a CISO? Is there a trigger point?
The CISO title is a marketing gambit, right? If you look at me as a CISO, am I a CISO? Yes, that's what my job is. But do I think I'm any different to being a VP of security and IT or a head of or a director of? I don't care. I don't care what you call me. I care what you pay me. You want to call people CISOs because it's a better marketing stance, right? That's the reality. Yeah. And because it parallels with the other C-suite. But I think in most startups, where like mine is, we have CFOs and CTOs and CPOs and CISOs. I'm like, do we really need C-level executives when the company's 10 to 15 million in revenue and whatever headcount, right? Yeah. Probably not. But that's a separate argument. I think you need someone who understands security from day one if you're a SaaS company. Like, yeah. Does that person need to be a VP? Probably not. When you hit 100-person headcount and you clear 5 million, you have to have a competent security leader in seat. If you haven't, that's the latest point. If you haven't by that point, you're going to have a problem.
And in that example then, so let's say I'm a fintech, we just hit the 100 mark. We've just had Series B funding. What would the kind of structure, what would be a solid structure, security team structure look like at that point? Would it just be one person? Could it be 2 or 3 individuals at a, say, a lower level? What in your opinion, would work there?
Again, I'm always going to base on SaaS companies, and a security leader who's good in a SaaS company is way nearer to almost like to a COO than they are to a CISO. They have a lot of value to add everywhere in the business because go-to-market is heavily reliant upon a CISO's ability to meet compliance standards and demonstrate front foot trust. If you look at like how you hire and train your people, HR is heavily reliant on how a security leader thinks about what the people need to know, how to train them, how to fish them, how to test them. Like similarly in product, you need to make sure that you build the SDLC, the software development lifecycle in a secure and robust and scalable way. So if your security should be in many places, so they can't be a one-person team. I think it's realistically like a 3 to 4. If you look like in a 100-person company, I'd expect to see a security leader, some kind of GRC compliance person, some kind of technical security engineering type person. And these days, I think it makes sense if you're not super big to have secure IT under security as well, because there's so much crossover. That team should be cross-functional. They should all be able to do each other's jobs or understand them competently, but specialize in one. But I don't think you can have a team smaller than a leader with 2 heads in a 100-person company, or else you are setting up to fail.
Something we see quite often is companies like that kind of profile who don't have security in place, security leadership in place, but they do have a very expensive tech stack. Maybe somebody that's not that technical sort of managing that. What's your opinion on that? Because obviously technology and, a lot of the cybersecurity vendors out there do a fantastic job at what they do, but is it a direct replacement for having the appropriate leadership?
No, you're pissing money against the wall. Like,
Yeah.
if you look at like most people's tech stack, the first thing I do and say like, again, let's go back, right? What are your risks? Buy tools that fix your risks, right? If you don't have a risk, why are you buying the tool? Like, it's just because, again, it was sexy, it was cool. There was a really good sales pitch where you saw them at Blackout and they had a monster truck, or they had girls in bikinis. Who knows, right? Well, you bought the tool because of some kind of rationale or reason that you were convinced of. You're not security, you don't know why you bought it. Like there are super, like you look at a lot of the Israeli companies like I work for, a lot of the people who run them are ex-IDF, they're super technical, they're super cyber savvy, but again, they don't understand modern security requirements. So like I would come in and say, and even that, the other problem beyond that is there's multiple tools where they've stood them up to do a problem, but they're only getting like 10% out of what the tool actually does because they don't have the people to understand how to use it, to properly automate it, to respond to it. Like AppSec's the most classic. I had a requirement to prove that I was remediating vulnerabilities. Great. So I went and bought Sneak. Great. Sneak created 15,000. Wonderful. What are you doing with them now? Don't know. They sat there. The amount of times I've gone into businesses and advised and tried to help them, I've gone, you've got like 25,000 vulnerabilities. Yeah, I know. We bought that tool to prove that we're like doing security right in our SDLC. I'm like, you've just proved you're an idiot. Like you've literally just proved that you've got 25,000 vulnerabilities and you've done nothing with them. What's the point in that you don't have the tool if you're not going to use it? So I think a lot of time they've bought tools with good intentions, but a good security leader will go, right, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that, but I do need this and I need another person. Because a lot of automation is built by people initially, ironically, not by just putting tools in place.
Yeah. It's again, we see that quite often where companies have made these huge investments in this tech stack, and they're getting pinged every 2 minutes with alerts of potential threats, etc. But they just don't have the right leadership in place to be able to deal with that, and they don't have the right people to interpret that data into what should they be doing to try and protect themselves in the first place.
I mean, AppSec's a great one to roll into that one as well. Like you get 15,000 vulnerabilities and the next thing they do is go, we need to fix all these. So they throw it to the CTO and say, you've got to fix 15,000 vulnerabilities. A good security leader comes in and goes, 15 of those 15,000, 12,000 are NA. Yeah. And here's why. Yeah. You've just taken a huge amount of time and cost out. So you'll see a startup CISO, let's say they're 250K US. That's a budget, cheap one. But like, you might have just saved that money in that first turn from the fact that you've just solved 12,000 single hours of work to fix vulnerabilities, right? So I think there's often like a lack of cognizance around the kind of ROI of how to do things as well.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because the majority of people that we speak to within a company tend to be stressed out CTOs. So, we have conversations across that C-suite, but it tends to be the CTOs of these startups who are the most stressed because of that exact reason. What is the difference between a fractional CISO, and this might sound like a silly question, and a full-time CISO? In terms of the actual job responsibilities, what's a fractional person doing differently to a full-time person?
I mean, that depends on the contract, the role, the company. There's a lot of nuances there, but overall, it's really a time thing. Like there's time in the day. So if you're running a full-time role, you're able to get much deeper and ingrained. You're probably a full-time executive helping drive the business forward. Good security leaders are aligned to the KPIs and business objectives of the business. And so I'm working on like, how do I drive anecdotes forward? A fractional CISO is purely fulfilling the scoped requirements of security. They're not going to sit in exec meetings. They're not going to talk about company strategy. They're probably just providing tasks to the team and then reviewing and kind of feedback and kind of kudos, I guess. But it depends on the scope, but it's generally a much less involved requirement, unless it's one of those weird ones where they've gone, we need a full-time CISO for 6 months to do A, B, and C, and their specific project tasks. So it does vary a lot, but I'd say less involved overall.
Another post I put out recently was about giving senior security people a place on the board in companies. Do you see that in the circles that you work in? Is that on the up, or?
When you mean board, do you mean in the English context of board being the executive team, or do you mean the American context?
Executive team. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be. I believe that any company under 5,000 people right now doesn't need a CIO. It's died. They should have a CISO. It becomes when you've got a very complex technology strategy, then CIO fine. But in the meantime, a CISO is more relevant, and they should be fundamental. If they're not part of the executive team, again, it's a failing on the CEO to recognize the value of security leaders.
Yeah. When you go in as a fractional CISO or even a full-time CISO, how do you, and again, I'm speaking from experience here, but how do you communicate cybersecurity to a CEO? Because we tend to find that they're not interested in the kind of the jargon or the kind of technicalities of cybersecurity. They just want to know how they can protect their business and how they can scale in a more kind of safe way. How do you approach that on kind of a ground level?
Well, I think you kind of answered your question in your question. So like you ask, as in any leader, right? Good executives deliver on company strategy. Yeah. So I would go and sit with the CEO and say, what does good look like? What do you want? What do you need? I need you to cut the budget in security. I need you to enable us to sell, like to not have any friction in sales cycles. I need you to ensure we're delivering safe product. Like I need you to make sure that the people are well trained and in like adequately competent in security requirements from coding basis, whatever the hell they want, right? First and foremost, deliver that. That's what you're there to do. That's your job. The second is speak in risk. So like I said, when I go and ask for, I learned this from my current CEO, Yair Kuznetsov, CEO anecdotes. Is he said, when you speak to me, if you're going to ask for money, tell me what risk you're fixing and show me the risk in the risk register. So yeah. I kind of switched my thinking. That's how I do it now, right? So I'll go and say, I speak in risk. I'm like, yeah, here's our risks. Here's what I'm currently spending and here's the tools I've got to fix them. You can see the 3 here where there's nothing in line with them. I need money. I'm going to buy A, B, and C, whether that's people or tooling, and it's going to fix these risks and it's bringing them down by like 30% to a manageable level. That's my pitch. And the answer is generally always, fine, Jake, go do it. So I think that's number 2 is like speak in risk. Don't just say I need 50 grand to do this because the answer is going to be why. I don't care. And then always speak back to like, how are you helping the business? So like I used to do some advisory work at Maui Gym, sunglasses. Their executive team talks about how do you sell more sunglasses. From the CEO to the CIO to the CFO, the answer is always like, what are you doing that helps us sell more sunglasses? And I think that you as a CISO should be able to answer that too, right? Whether that is compliance that opens new markets, or whether that is better AppSec development transparency that removes the friction in sales cycles, or whether that is ensuring that we do better in our development to remove vulnerabilities and therefore speed up the increase or velocity of release cycles, whether that is educating our BDRs and salespeople to use security as a go-to-market driver, whether that is enabling us to go to our board, in this context, our team, and explain in a more coherent way why we need to spend money on this. Because maybe you can relate back to risk, which the CEO is not able to explain the same way, right? Find the way that you can help drive the business forward. Stop being a cost center. That's like a thousands approach to security. Yeah. You're a profit center and you should be. If you're not, then you don't understand your role in the company.
So based on that, and again, I hear people all the time talking about, cybersecurity. If I implement things within my company, it's going to slow me down. It's going to slow the business down. Do you then think that cybersecurity should become something that should be viewed as something that can actually help a company win business rather than just, slow me down because of the red tape and the added processes?
You've got a problem there going back to leadership. So I talked about there's many people in the seat who don't know what they're doing or don't have the right skill set. I think a lot of the time they come from a consulting background, from like an audit or advisory world, from like the Bains and the McKinseys, the Accentures, that kind of company. And their historical role was to give people advice and not do anything with it. This is my own negative approach to consulting, but tell people what to do, but don't actually have to do it. Yep. And I think that created this culture of the Department of No. Like, good security leaders are the opposite of no. We are risk aggressive. We are friends to CTOs. We are the people who want to make things go faster. Because in the end, especially if you're in a fast growing startup, you're equity bound to want success. Like, you want an exit, and neither would you want an IPO, but those days have died. Like, you want an exit, so you want to see the business grow, so you want to facilitate Like I want to make the release cycle faster. I want to be able to mean they have to deal with more critical and less overall vulnerabilities. I want to make sure that like sales cycles are less frictious. There's stuff that you want to do to make the business go forward. You don't want to be slowing it down. If you can't explain how you're making things more fluid and how you're making things better, not just slowing it down, then again, you've got a problem in your leadership. AI is the best example. The amount of CISOs just went, I'm going to block AI. I'm going to say no to it. Man, that's like the stupidest response in the world. Like, firstly, one, you're going to create the fastest growing shadow IT culture in history because people are going to do it anyway. So, like, that's a terrible idea. And secondly, like, man, this is a great chance to own it. Like, go and say, you know what? Yeah, I think AI is a great thing. Tell you what, it's slightly out of my remit, but I'm going to work on what tools we can deploy in security and inside of IT and in the broader company to make things move faster, better, and stronger. And because I'm owning it, I'm now trusted to go and tell people which AI tools they can use and which they can't because I'm the guy. Go and take control and demonstrate your value by owning things. The guy that says no has no value in the room. Because like, give me something else. Like, just a no doesn't help. Like we've got a worse reputation than the financial guys at this point for just saying no.
And have you ever seen an example of that then, where a company has actually used security or their, you know, how strong their security is as a way of actually winning business? Has it been used as a tool, as a selling?
I don't think we can find individual examples of that anymore because I think it's just a common requirement across the piece. Right. If you're a SaaS company, you need security. If you don't have a SOC 2 Type 2 at a minimum, you can't sell. So yeah. I don't think anyone uses it as a differentiator anymore, but I think that in itself answers the question that everybody needs to have good security in place because it's not a differentiator in winning business, but it's a differentiator in definitely losing business.
Yeah. And you see that in the VC world as well. Where, you know, VCs now, certainly the ones that we're working with, are now getting a lot more strict around making sure that any investments, any of their portfolio have got the right level of security people, or certainly they've done assessments to evaluate what their kind of threats and risks are. So I know the VC community are starting to really ramp up a bit of pressure on their portfolio companies as well. SOC 2, ISO. In your opinion, when is it too early for companies to really kind of care about these certifications?
I've got to be very careful because I have a reputation for being outspoken on this topic. And I work for a vendor who deals with compliance automation, but I want to be specific, right? That one thing I'm passionate about is that why I came to Anecdotes is Anecdotes does GRC automation. It makes your GRC practice better. It's not relevant to your compliance standards or your audits. And I frame that because I then want to say, I don't really care. Like, from the start, find a framework to align to that builds security that is right for your business, right? So maybe that's NIST 800. There is no audit for NIST 800, right? Maybe that is CMMC. There's no real audit for CMMC. Like if you want to go government and hardcore, maybe it's a control set around CAP AI or GDPR, like whatever the hell you're picking, right? Build a control set and an ability to secure your business and scale your compliance based on what's relevant to you. Yes, at some point you're going to have to go and get SOC 2 and maybe ISO 2 because your customers are going to just have it as a tick box in their TPRM questionnaire, but never take that as the foundation for how you build security. That's my kind of, I suppose, part one of the answer. Part two is, when are you going to need it? I think it used to be when you were selling a SaaS product after you cleared a couple of million ARR. Now I think it's almost day one. It's very, very hard not to. And then it becomes very difficult where it's like, for a company from day one to get SOC 2 using like a trust management platform and an auditor for $5,000, their compliance posture is meaningless. Like most decent CISOs will pull it apart and go, what the F is this? Yeah. Like the reality is that, like I said, go back to building security and compliance. Go and get your certificate if you need to, but go and build security and compliance that's based on what you have in the context of your business. And that demonstrates a far better posture externally from a trust stance than just saying I have a SOC 2 report from an auditor you've never heard of.
And what then is a turning point? So the kind of converse of that question, at what point does it goes to kind of having from being a nice to have to an essential? What's the kind of trigger point for that typically?
If you're a SaaS product, I don't think there is one. I think your first couple of customers are going to say you need a SOC 2. So yeah. I almost think there isn't one now. It used to be. I think that's what's devalued SOC 2 almost so much, is the fact that now people are just requiring from day one. I'm looking at companies who are like a year old and have like not got any real revenue stream, and they're not SOC 2 certified with no security team on like policy templates that they haven't even changed like any of the text in. So I think that's why it's become a bit meaningless. But yeah, I'd say that it's now becoming almost a day one of sales requirement.
Okay. And if you were sat across from a CEO right now, what would you say to him or her are there three most common sort of blind spots that they have with security right now?
Application security is number one. Like, I'm a technical guy. AppSec for me is always number one. Are you remediating vulnerabilities in line with your SLAs and the requirements that you said that you will do? Do you have visibility into your vulnerabilities? Do you understand your third-party code components? So kind of your actual like proper, I suppose, the SBOM of your code base, or the software bill of materials, those who aren't technical. Like, do you know which kind of open source components you're putting in there and what patching is done on those? Like, do you know how secure your code is? Number two is people. Click-through training is pointless and most phishing tools are meaningless. Like, what are you doing to really test, demonstrate, and progress the competency of your employees from a stance of securing your business and not making you vulnerable? So I guess that's number two. Number three is, how are you viewing GRC or compliance? Like, is that just to get me a SOC 2 and an ISO because I need it in a sales cycle, or are you building meaningful compliance where it's guiding your security practices through both data and AI and giving you translatable logic or language that you can present to your investor team, to your other executives, to your stakeholders to explain why you're doing what you're doing? Because in the end, GRC and compliance becomes the way that people see and understand the business.
So what's the kind of, what actionable things could these CEOs be doing like this week and next to kind of address some of those things?
I want you to ask me that question before you ask me. I gave you hard things to put blind spots. AppSec is sit down with whoever, whether it's being run by a CTO, so because you've not hired security, if you've hired security, sit down and try and get real understanding. Like, have someone explain to you, our code is composed of these open source components and these custom components. Here's the vulnerabilities that we're commonly finding and having. Here's our process for fixing and patching open source components. Here's where we are. Here's the ones that we can't change, because sometimes you can't because it's out of cards. Like, here's our ability to remediate against vulnerabilities. And here, key fact, here's the data that shows that everything I'm telling you is not just me giving rhetoric, but is true. Right? That's point one. Point two, employee security would, like, I'm a social engineer background. I'd go and try and hack half the execs just to prove a point. But then I'd say, look, here's where we're vulnerable. Like, I went and exploited 3 employees through these vectors, and this is what happened. And here's the learning exercises from it. And here is what we should do to improve that, right? Maybe that's identified we need to train them better. Maybe it's identified that we need to block social media, whatever, right? Maybe it's identified that we need to tell people that they make sure and test people that they verify the identity of an individual through a secondary factor prior to responding with any informational data. Like, let's identify what the issues are and let's fix those. And again, let's retest and use data to show that we fixed our gaps, right? It always comes back to me for data. The last one, from a compliance stance, I'd say it's probably the biggest one I'm going to use, the word data, right? Like, show me the reality. Like, if you're going to say you're SOC 2 compliant, we're ISO compliant, we're going to say all these things in our trust center, show me the evidence in real-time data that supports that the things that we say are true and that we're not going to get caught out. So I guess if you summarize them into one, if I was the CEO, I would say the blind spots are application security, people security, compliance. And the answer to all 3 of those is, I would say, show me the gaps and show me the data that shows that we're fixing the gaps or have fixed them.
Social engineering, is that something you think every company should be doing?
I think yes, reality no. So I've been fortunate. I've worked in a lot of startups and scale-ups where I've been given free remit. So I can, like, I've done some horrendous things in my time to CEOs and CFOs where I've put them into very compromising and stressful positions by mimicking through video or audio their pregnant wives or partners, and put them into like hospitalization situations where they think there's something horrendous is going on, then put them into pressure and made them do something they shouldn't have done. That's because that's what I enjoy is the wrong word, but it's kind of like my skill set. And in big enterprises, that would be in breach of so many HR policies that I don't even know where to start. So I don't think, I think everyone should do it. I don't think it's feasible for everyone to do to the degree that I would think that you should do it. But I think there should be at least good educational practices in place that say, we're in an age we can't trust anything. If I Zoom call you as the CEO and tell you to do something which is not normal, then verify that via Slack or via text or via WhatsApp. We should be teaching people, like, this is what phishing attacks now look like. Here are some indicators that you can basically check, right? Common things like an AI. Can you get the person to turn to the back of the head? Because it's a common thing that AI is very hard to mimic in video still to this day. So, like, find some things which you can teach people and then pick a small sample and test them. But you're going to have to, in big enterprises, make them aware that you're testing them and follow HR protocols, et cetera. But I think social engineering is now such an important vector of attack that you have to do something, no matter how big or how complicated or how regulated you are.
Yeah, and I think that's a really big missing piece of the jigsaw for a lot of companies, that they're kind of skirting over the fact that this is going to become a real challenge for them, and that's probably the number one threat to them as a business. So
I
it's
agree, and I
interesting.
think further to that, you've also got to point out the fact that we have this like naivety that corporate assets are only used for work and nothing else.
Yeah.
And I also think that's just shouldn't be how it is, right? You don't give someone a MacBook and they expect them to buy a second MacBook just for their email and their like Instagram account. Like, it's just crazy. So like you don't want to create a culture where you're forcing people into shadow IT. So again, you want to educate people. Look, we know you're going to use all these home-based tools. We know your kid's probably going to watch bloody Netflix on the laptop, whatever, right? But here's some like logical steps to ensure that like you think things through. So when we're teaching you things about corporate social engineering, apply them in your home life, because it's more likely you're going to get compromised in the home side of your device, which is your business device, than you are in the work side of it, because there's probably got good email filters, DLPs, better gateways and stuff, and like it's harder to attack while you're at work. It's the home side where you're vulnerable. So like just being more transparent about the fact people are okay to do that, and we're going to educate you and arm you rather than just telling you not to. Again, it comes back to this whole don't be the no guy.
A question I probably should have asked you right at the beginning. Why did you choose cybersecurity as a career? What?
I didn't. Cyber chose me. So I grew up playing with my computers. My dad was really into IT at a young age. So we had like the whole like Amstrad switching to Mega Drives when I was a kid, and like I used to like write cheat codes for games. And I remember we built PCs. He'd never buy it. Well, we weren't very rich, but he'd never buy a PC. He'd buy all the bits, and we'd build and upgrade over time. So I grew up like screwing things into towers and like connecting like the parts and resoldering broken circuit boards. So I grew up with computers and like playing on like trying to break like spectrums, and like this is kind of my world. So I then went away. I ended up in both at IBM as a technologist, and then initially at KPMG doing some finance stuff. And then they built a pen test team in the north of KPMG in the UK and said, who wants to join? And I was like, oh, sounds interesting. I kind of like the idea of being a hacker. I did a hack the box and destroyed the box and realized that like my brain is wired for this kind of stuff. Went there and I've never looked back. I'm one of those fortunate people who accidentally found the job which gives me meaning in life, which I love doing what I do, almost too much sometimes. And I think that is the greatest blessing you can get in life, is falling into something which you truly love.
Definitely. Look, really, really appreciate all of your expert input into those questions. I'm sure people got some valuable takeaways from that. I'll put some links in the show notes on how people can connect with you if they've got any further questions. Okay, but as I say, really appreciate your time, and catch up with you soon.
No, absolute pleasure. Totally all mine. So thank you for having me. Take care. Bye bye.